So why don't we kick this off, Jen? Why don't you talk about the gap in the gain? Let's start with what is it, and then maybe we could talk about why it's important, maybe give some examples and some action steps for folks.
Yeah. Well, the gap in the gain is a relatively new concept that I learned from you and Dan Sullivan's Strategic Coach program this year. And I have to say, it's been one of the most influential concepts in my own life because New Year's is typically my favorite holiday. I even like it more than Christmas and Thanksgiving. Yeah. And I don't think I've ever told you that.
Learning this while we're recording.
I know. But the reason why is because I love setting goals and I love coming up with new things to strive for. I'm a very goal-driven person. Most high performers are. I mean, you and I are both goal-driven. But I've never thought about the most rewarding way to measure my progress. And the gap in the gain is all about how you measure your progress so that your future self grows, but you're constantly measuring yourself backwards, if that makes sense. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
So it's really about, people that are in the gap tend to be focused on what's not working right, tend to be focused on why the goal didn't work, and they're not happy. And they're not happy because they're not focusing on the real measure of progress, which is who you are becoming along the way. And there's a lot of examples that we could use with the gap and the gain. And you have a couple. You have a few.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to elaborate a little bit. The gap, the name gap, is referring specifically to where you are currently,
right. Your current self.
When you are measuring against the ideal. Which is not achievable.
Right.
And this is the underpinning to the dissatisfaction and the momentum killing, is that no matter how much progress you make, when you compare it to the horizon that's always moving, you will never be satisfied.
Right.
Whereas the gain is simply turning around. You use the horizon as a mechanism to set goals directionally, but you don't measure against the goal.
Right.
You measure against where we started the journey. And this forces you to notice progress, which unlocks your happiness. And that's not natural.
No. Most of us prefer to stay in the gap, to be honest.
Well, it's the default.
Right.
It's the default for the human condition. And even masters of people who are incredible at staying in the gain will fall into the gap. But the real masters notice immediately, and they pull themselves out. Dan actually calls them gap hunters.
Gap hunters, right.
They're constantly hunting for areas in their life and the people in their inner circle where you're in the gap to help you notice, hey, the only reason you're frustrated is because you're measuring against some ideal. Measure against your progress, and it will immediately free you. And it's just a wonderful concept.
I also love it because it keeps you focused on your own goals and not somebody else's goal. So a lot of times people that set goals, compare themselves, their progress, compare their outcome to where somebody else is maybe further along than them, or...
It's not even their ideal.
Right.
It's someone else's fabricated ideal.
You are in control of your measuring your progress. You are in control of that goal, which is really freeing. It's like,
It's one of the most significant concepts to come across my attention in recent memory. It's probably in the top 10. And I'm endlessly curious for truth, kind of significant things, revelations, mindsets, intellectual shortcuts. All of these things, I'm constantly looking for these things. And this is a remarkably significant and yet elegantly, ridiculously simple.
Yeah.
Which I think is the brilliance of it all.
Right.
I was going to give an example. I think about as a young man, and I think about a lot of young people, you grow up and you have some idea about what an ideal life would look like at a certain earning level, right? And gosh, if I could just make X, I think I would be happy. So you set forth, and it was great to get you started. But each progressive increase towards that number, X, you still can't even celebrate because you're not at X. And then if you're talented enough and you stick with it long enough, you achieve what you thought was going to be, you thought X was going to be that was where the stopping point was. And when you look up, you say, well, maybe it's X times 2.
Yeah.
And the punchline is the horizon always continues to move. And what happens in that scenario, whether it's finances, a relationship, a spiritual journey, or weight, some health-related thing, 2 things happen as I see it. Number 1, you're perpetually unhappy.
Yeah.
And happiness is like happiness and joy. We've done some content. It's the most underrated emotion in the human experience. I think it's the most significantly positive emotion you can feel as a human is joy and happiness. Just genuine, I'm happy.
Yeah.
When you are constantly comparing yourself against the horizon, which you never arrive, you really struggle with authentic, true happiness.
Yeah.
That's thing number 1, which sounds terrible. You never arrive, so you're always unhappy. You're holding your happiness hostage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you never gain progress. You never fully step into the journey of who you are becoming along this journey that you are actually on. Your only thing that's real is your real life right now. But we can get so locked into this ideal that all of our joy and happiness is just held hostage.
Yeah. Wow.
It's pretty powerful stuff.
It is.
So what's the antidote, right? So how would you coach someone if somebody is like, oh my gosh, I'm that way in my life? The antidote is just turn around.
Right.
Measure backwards.
Yeah.
Measure towards when you start. Yeah, no, you haven't lost 50 pounds and that was the goal. Great. But you're down 12. Right on. That's wonderful. How can you not be excited about 12 pounds? Or you doubled your income and you're not where you want to be, but great. And you've doubled your income and got a 30% reduction of your work. Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And what happens is you start to create momentum because you start craving the happiness.
Yeah. I know personally for me, when I get stuck in the gap, and you're really good about calling me out, which I appreciate, is, I use terms like, well, I should, or I could, I should get up and work out first thing in the morning, but I have to be to work at 7 or 7:30, and that's just way too early. No, that's gap thinking. And then all progress stops, right? Because your momentum just stops.
Well, I'll tell you that the other aspect, not only are we holding our happiness hostage, but in the event that you get to where you thought the horizon was, it moves.
Yeah. Right.
So not only are you unhappy, but you're disappointed. Like Tony Robbins talks about, the ultimate failure is success without fulfillment.
Yeah.
So if you happen to be successful at the goal you set out to be, and you're locking away all joy and happiness until you reach that goal, and then you actually reach it where you're supposed to be happy, and then you realize, I'm no more happier than I was when I was broke, or I'm no more happier than I was 25 pounds heavier.
Yep.
Maybe it's 100 pounds. Maybe it's 3 times the income. And so this double-edged sword of complete loss of happiness and unbelievable disappointment when you actually achieve it and it doesn't bring the happiness isn't just around the corner.
Yeah.
Happiness is a decision.
Yeah.
You have to decide to be happy. And the way that you can unlock the emotional journey of that is that when you decide to be happy, you notice progress. Then the feelings are a lagging finding.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's really good. It's really, really good.